Well, hello. I'd like to welcome you all to the CPP Education Team's Ask an Expert webinar, the MBTI Assessment, Overview, and Verifying Type. We have more than 75 people in attendance today and about 150 registered as well. So we're expecting a really good turnout today, which is super exciting. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. My name is Leah Walling, and I'm the Director of Marketing Communications here at CPP. I'll be moderating today's webinar, and we'll be introducing our featured speaker, Judy Gruder, momentarily. But before I do, I'd like to do a quick walkthrough of the webinar format for those new participants we have in the audience today. So today's webinar will run for approximately 90 minutes. And during the presentation, if you have questions, you're welcome to either raise your hand and submit a question to me or send me a chat message with your question. Judy will be pausing throughout the webinar today, as she normally does, to answer your questions, and I'll give everyone a chance to pose their questions during these breaks. Also, two representatives from the CPP Education Team are also in attendance, Jim Larkin and Jack Powers, and they'll be available to answer questions as well at the end of the webinar. Judy will be introducing them a little bit later on. So as with all of our webinars, today's will be recorded. And we'll be sending out a link to the recording in just a few days. So now that I've walked you through the logistics, I'd like to introduce our expert. I'm very excited to welcome CPP's Ask an Expert, Judy Gruder, GS Principal and Trainer. Judy has been a career development program consultant and trainer for more than 35 years, as well as a national certified counselor and NCDA Master Career Counselor. She is a recognized authority on the uses of assessments in career counseling and is co-author of a number of publications and reports on the Strong Interest Inventory and Myers-Briggs tools. Judy is also the author of the GS Mbti certification program, specifically for career counselors and educators, and co-author of the GS Strong Interest Inventory certification program. So please join me in welcoming Judy, and now I'd like to turn over the webinar to her. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you, Leah, and hi, everyone. I just wanted to emphasize that I'm going to stop at a few points during the program, and if you have questions, if you'll just type them in the chat box, Leah will get them and she'll feed them to me, and when we stop at the various points that I mentioned, I'll make sure and pick up the questions that seem to pertain to what we're talking about. We're actually looking at a very important topic today, probably the question that I'm asked most often during our certification programs, and that is, how do we verify students' type? This will be a review for most of you, but maybe a quick introduction for others. I'm going to talk about the basics of type first, and then look at various strategies for verifying type with students. The MBTI instrument identifies polar opposites in 4 areas that are called preference pairs. The ways people naturally prefer to direct and get energy by using extraversion or introversion, how we prefer to take in information by using sensing or intuition, how we prefer to make decisions by using thinking or feeling, and how we prefer to live our daily lives by using judging or perceiving. Each preference or type identifies normal and valuable human behaviors. There are no right or wrong MBTI results. They describe how people can be different and still be normal, and also describe how people of the various types have a lot in common with each other. The 4 preference pairs line up like this. Most of you are familiar with this. We naturally have a preference for one pole over the other in each pair, although we all tend to use both at different times. So, for instance, I might have a preference for introversion, which I do. That's where most of my energy comes from, but I'm choosing to extrovert as I talk with you now. Type is the natural preferred way of using one's mind and directing energy. It's a lot like folding your arms, and if you want to, if you haven't done it before, go ahead and fold your arms and then put the other arm on top. And do you notice a difference? It usually feels very different, like trying to write with your opposite hand. The moral of the story, the point of type preferences, is that we want to spend most of our time with our arms folded naturally, writing with our preferred hand, using our natural preferences. And although we all learn to use our opposite preferences, spending a lot of time there can produce tension and stress. The 4 preference pairs form 16 types. Each type is a dynamic interaction of the letters, and although each letter has its own inherent meaning, the complexity of the instrument comes from how each letter is enhanced by the other 3. The manual and most MBTI publications include brief descriptions of each of the types that show how the letters work together. The brief descriptions look like this, and each 4-letter combination has some core characteristics. This is actually a scan of the table of descriptions that appears in many CPP publications. I like to explain to people that type is like a 16-room house. Think of your very favorite place in your house or apartment. That's like your type. It's where you can really be yourself, where you feel grounded and natural. My type preferences are INTJ, and my very favorite room is my home office. It's where my books are and my computer. It's pretty private, so I can paint the walls my favorite shade of green, and I can have my favorite Fowler wildlife poster of purple elephants on the wall. My husband wouldn't have liked it if I had asked to put that poster in the living room, I can assure you. The living room was my husband's favorite room. He passed away several years ago, but how well I remember him sitting around the fire in the winter with his friends or students. He was an ENFP type. He wanted his space to be warm and inviting. I go into his living room every day, and into the kitchen and into the bedrooms and even the yard when it's full of snow. I live in Lake Tahoe where there's a lot of snow. But when I come back to my office, I'm really home. I'm sure my husband felt that way about his place in front of the fire. That's what living your natural type feels like, and spending time there gives you the energy to go into all of the other rooms, the other 15 types, when you want to or need to. The MBTI isn't like other assessments. It doesn't measure amounts, it sorts people into their favorite rooms or the type categories. Because of all of the things that can influence how people answer the questions on the MBTI, there's a recommended interpretation sequence that minimizes the error of measurement. This process is called type verification. Before giving students their results, we want to explain what type is, have them experience the arm folding or writing your name, and you want to describe the 4 preference pairs. You then encourage students to estimate what their type is from your descriptions, and ask them to choose the preferences that describe how they are on a job or when they're in school. Only then do you give back their MBTI results and discuss any discrepancies and verify their most natural or best fit type. Here is a student who estimates his type to be ESTP, and his profile reports the same type. At school and at work, he sees himself as ISTJ. Notice that the P comes up twice and the J only once, and the E comes up twice and the I only once. If we're counting, it's more likely that ESTP is this student's best fit type. But if he disagrees and says that ISTJ is a better fit, or he identifies with any other type, we have a saying in career counseling and advising that the client, the student, is always right. Respondents with an S in their type will usually count. Students with an N in their type tend to trust their hunches more than data. When the self-assessment, the school, work type, and the reported results all line up, it's most likely that you've got the true type, and you can move forward with a static interpretation, which matches types with college majors and career fields. But when the pieces don't line up, or the student can't decide, you have to dig a little deeper, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The type verification process individually, in a group, voice-to-voice, through web conferencing, there are many different ways to do it, is as important a part of interpreting type as looking at the profile itself. And Leah, before I go on to talk about any strategies, I'm just wondering if any questions have come in just about type basics up to this point.
Yeah, we've actually got have a question from Jesse Wagner that has a couple of parts to it. So why don't I start with the first part?
Please.
So Jesse is interested. how do you approach the situation when a client says they think they're both of the pairs and can't make a decision? He finds that that happens most often for the heart of type pairs.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I'm going to be addressing that pretty well later in the program if Jesse can just be patient.
Oh.
I think that's inherent in having questions around verifying type. People will say, I can't decide, or I'm both. And we all are both.
Okay.
The question is just really, what is the natural preference? What is the one that's the most like your hand? Your handedness or your arm folding or whatever, and I'll come back to some strategies for that.
Okay, terrific.
So stick around, Jesse.
So yeah, so he's interested in exercises or activities at the point when you address that. So
good.
And I think, let's see. So Deb Frazier says she's never used school or work estimate of type. Can you go into more detail about what that is?
Yeah, when you're describing the preference pairs to students or any clients, you're talking about them very generally in terms of natural preferences. For TF, for instance, when you make decisions, which criteria do you go to first? Do you go to logical criteria, or do you go to more personal criteria for making the decision? And very often people will know what their natural type is, but they'll also be aware that when they're in school doing school tasks or when they're on the job, they have to shift to the other side. And of course what we want is to spend most of our work time and our school time in our natural preferences, but that just isn't the way life is. And many of us actually feel our most natural when we're in our work setting, and others feel much more natural when they're outside of the work setting. So it's just kind of standard procedure to help people self-estimate how they are, then look at how they might adjust or be the same in a work setting, and then look at the profile results and then get an average of the three. I hope that helps a little.
Okay. And then we've got a question on verifying type from Joseph Padua.
Okay.
Joseph is interested. How would you do the self-estimate without sharing the profile results?
Oh, you have to, and actually I'm going to be talking about this, I think, quite a bit, is what kinds of questions you asked and what kinds of examples you used. But you really have to give very clear examples of each of the preferences in a pair. And so it isn't enough to just say sensing versus intuition describes paying attention to facts and details versus looking at the big picture and possibilities. You need to pull out specific examples. And those examples will depend, first of all, on the respondent's experience, because by the time you're interpreting type, you've spent enough time with them, hopefully a few minutes, that you know a little bit of their frame of reference. So you try to pull out examples from their experience. And then a lot of it also depends on type dynamics, and we're going to address that at the end of the program. I think the safest thing to do is to give a general description of each of the preferences in the pair, and then say to the respondent, how does that play out in your life? And they'll usually go to sensing versus intuition, or intuition versus sensing, to describe certain things. And you can reflect back and say, I'm really hearing sensing from what you're saying.
Okay.
We all right?
I think those are all the questions that have come in at this point.
Okay, and I think that we're actually going to dive into deeper answers to the questions that you just shared with me. So the question is, what do we do when type isn't clear, when respondents can't decide? And we're going to look today at 3 different ways to verify type. And you can learn a lot more about this in the MBTI manuals and in publications and in certification programs. And there are probably 300 different ways to verify type. I just picked the 3 that are the easiest to use and the ones that seem to work the best for me. First of all, we can pair letters in the type table to form type table configurations. So when people aren't clear, for instance, on one letter in a pair, such as thinking versus feeling, we can pair the letters in the type table according to the columns or the quadrants, or we can look at temperaments. And sometimes just by comparing and contrasting two columns of the type table or two quadrants, it helps them to verify the letter that's in question. We can certainly listen for and explain type dynamics. What part of the type is extroverted, what part of the type is introverted, what part of the type shows up when the person is under stress, things like that. And I'm going to demonstrate each of these. And then we could administer and interpret the MBTI Step 2, which adds 20 subscales to the 4 preference pairs. The key to helping people to verify their natural type preferences lies in the process that I've been talking about. The types of examples that are used, the kinds of questions that are asked, providing accurate feedback on what you're seeing and hearing in your student or client. And self-estimates won't always agree with reported type, as one of the questions mentioned, and will require some exploration. Sally Carr, in her booklet Finding the Fit, makes the following suggestions, and I think they're really good ones. Ask some opening questions. Were you wearing any particular hat when you took the assessment? Were you thinking of yourself at work or at home or as an employee or as a parent or as a son or as a daughter or as a significant other or a spouse? And sometimes the hat that you're wearing, the role that you see yourself in when you answer the questions will skew or direct the way you actually answer them. It helps sometimes to explore shoulds. Is there any reason why you feel you should be one preference or the other? And that very often comes up with younger college students who are first breaking away from parental messages for the first time. They're still living their shoulds, but balancing against those shoulds are their natural preferences, and if they're different, then the preference will be unclear. You might want to explore different situations. When do you feel the most natural? At home, at work, at school, when you're playing sports, when you're at leisure? And if you're working with an adult, how might you have responded to the MBTI 10 years ago? Do you think it might have been different when you were younger, when you were in college? Keep in mind that it's not appropriate at all to have someone take the MBTI according to any one specific situation. For instance, you wouldn't tell someone to answer the questions as if you are at work or as if you are at home. One of the things we've noticed, for instance, is that thinking types tend to be more natural at work, and feeling types are more natural outside of work when they're in personal relationships or when they're at home. Sally Carr also recommends looking at the implications of type dynamics, and this is a more advanced level of interpreting type. For instance, considering ESFP versus ESFJ. I might ask, do you think it's more important to experience things? That would be ESFP, or to evaluate them, ESFJ. Do you think your friends see you as more friendly and fun? That's ESFP, or friendly and helpful? That's ESFJ. Is the person deliberately working on trying to use a less preferred preference? I've always been super organized and planful, but I'm learning to be more spontaneous, and I really like it. I actually interpreted one like this yesterday, who was an ISTJ, and he's a manager, early 40s, very proud of the fact that he finally, after years and years and years, tested ISFJ because he's been working on that so hard. And he claimed that as his type until I asked him that question. And what he was aware of was that he was making a conscious choice to develop feeling, which was his tertiary function. And at this point in his life, that's what's coming to the surface. Also, one of the things that we'll look at doing in considering type dynamics is pairing letters, for instance, the middle 2 letters of the type, and asking which describes you better. NT, which is understanding, or NF, which is empowering. These are all different applications of type dynamic strategies, and they can be very helpful just informing the questions that you're asking. It's perfectly okay as the practitioner to give feedback on what you're observing in your student or client. To say something like, you seem to take time to reflect before you speak, and your style seems more like that of an introvert. What do you make of that? Now, Jane Keyes is an expert on differentiated learning, And in her book, Differentiation Through Personality Type, she suggests some specific questions to ask students to help to verify EI and JP preferences. She also suggests some questions around SN and TF, and we're going to look at those a little later. One of the questions she asks around extroversion introversion, which is the energy preference pair, is where do you like to do your homework? Do you do it at the kitchen table or on the phone with friends as an extrovert might, or do you do it in your room away from distractions, which is more the introverted style? After class, are you ready to be with friends right away, or do you enjoy more time alone listening to music or reading before getting together with friends? For judging versus perceiving, the general approach to life, when ordering at a restaurant, for instance, do you pretty much know what you want, which is the J preference? Or do you read the whole menu, check what friends are having, see what's being brought to other tables, even interview the chef? That would be the more P perspective. Do you usually choose a topic for a report and stick with it, or do you often change topics while you're working on it? And when respondents can answer questions like these fairly easily for all 4 preference pairs, and their reported type is pretty clear, a static interpretation of type can be very helpful. A static interpretation of type associates certain behaviors and characteristics with each of the letters in a type and with each of the 16 whole types. Certain careers and college majors are associated with each type. We say, for instance, that INTP types are more likely to become scientists than the other 15 types, and perhaps major in physics. And that ESFJ types are more likely to become elementary school teachers and major in early childhood education. These static statements are based on solid research. The data that we use is called a self-selection ratio, or SSRs, and they compare the percentage of each type found in specific occupations with the percentage of each type that is found in the general population. Now, for instance, this is a clear ESFJ profile for a student who also verified ESFJ as her best fit type. This is actually the profile from the career report for the MBTI. And because she's pretty clear and verified her preferences, it's safe to say that this person will probably find satisfaction in occupations where she can provide practical service to others, such as most of the ones that are listed here on the ESFJ career report itself. And she'll probably be interested in exploring college majors like education and child development, social work, animal care, office management, hospitality, religion, anything else that involves practical service to others. But what do we do when the preferences aren't so clear? For instance, when the dominant is slight, as in this profile, the dominant for this type would be feeling or thinking, and it's in the slight category. This could be someone who's initially developing dominant feeling or dominant thinking, but it could also be someone who's clear about F or T, but who's integrating the other side, which often happens mid-career or midlife. Even more challenging than that one is the profile where the dominant is slight, or we really don't know if it's the dominant, if it's slight, and then the JP orientation is also slight. I'm just showing you the typical ones that we struggle with when we're verifying. Here's another one. Now this one, we're seeing a lot of this in millennial students who are in college now. The EI and the JP orientations are clear, and the mental functions are slight, those middle 2 letters. We're seeing a lot of this profile with students that are coming into college now, because parents are protecting their students a lot more when they're in high school and younger. And because they're protecting them from making mistakes and from experiencing consequences, very often they haven't defined their own way of taking in information and making decisions when they take the MBTI for the first time. And so we have a challenging road ahead of us. It's particularly challenging because these students want answers now, and their sense of self isn't developed enough to get them. And when we can't give them the answers, they get very frustrated. And profiles like this one suggest a clear need to live everyday life in a very J way, but they don't have any clarity around what to J with. So they're Jing, but they're not consistently Jing through thinking or feeling. And even more challenging when nothing is really clear at all. Keep in mind that the reliability of results decreases on the MBTI as preference clarity indexes decrease. Those are the numbers that you're seeing. We can't make any assumptions at all about the accuracy of E, S, and F on this profile. And J it's a moderate preference, and of course we would start there in talking about it. It kind of makes sense that the surer a person is of their natural preferences, the more consistently they'll respond to the indicator and the more reliable the results will be. If all of their preferences are clear, they probably won't even be seeking career counseling or academic advising. It's interesting that all of the textbooks about type present clients with clear assessment results and match them up with careers, and most of our clients are great big question marks. Just to note that the instrument itself isn't any less valid when PCIs are slight. It's the results that are in question, the reliability, the repeatability of the results. In fact, when PCIs are slight, we want to find out why, and the indicator puts the questions right out on the table. And keep in mind that the indicator only gives us reported type. Best fit type emerges from the type verification process that we discussed earlier. And even preference clarity indexes of 1 are more likely to be accurate on the MBTI Form M than on any other assessment that claims to indicate type. But we also have to keep in mind that we can't use a static interpretation matching students up with majors and careers until we have a verified type. It's important to explore just for a minute what might be behind unclear type, because these are the factors that we're going to want to explore as we're clarifying and verifying. External expectations, especially expectations of work environments and parents, play a big role in the clarity of type. And some people will attach negative connotations to some words like introverted and judging. They'll read judging as judgmental. Sometimes there'll be a lack of identity development, and this is what we've been talking about with millennial students, where parents have been sparing consequences and the middle 2 letters of type just haven't formed yet when they come to college and are actually exploring majors. Sometimes when the instrument is taken in a situation of authority, it can relate an unclear type. And what comes to mind for me is once, a few years ago, I was giving a presentation to the California Bar Association. There were 500 lawyers, and I was brought in to administer a self-scorable MBTI and then do a very brief understanding of differences and kind of a team-building activity for the afternoon. I was supposed to have about 4 hours. And just before I went on, they kept postponing it back, so the time was getting cut back and back and back. And by the time when I went on, I only had an hour and a half. And I was handing out these self-scorables for people to take. And the person who had hosted the meeting, I guess big honcho attorney in California, stood up and made a very big announcement that went along the lines of something like, now you folks know that attorneys are very straightforward and they have very strong personalities and they're very extroverted, and I expect you to answer that way. Now that would be taking the assessment in a position of authority, and the boss, so to speak, was actually telling the participants in this program how he expected them to come out, and by golly they did. And when people brought up questions and started discussing it, he kept backing them off and saying things like, well, maybe you shouldn't be an attorney, or maybe you have to learn to adjust. And it was very definitely an unclear type-producing situation. When the MBTI is taken at a time of transition or stress, maybe the first week away at college or just being laid off or in the middle of a divorce, something like that, that can cause unclear type. The time of personality integration. At midlife, we tend to integrate our less preferred functions, and briefly those functions may show up as unclear on the indicator itself. And of course there are many other factors, we just have to ask. We looked earlier at the process of verifying type, describing the preferences and getting a self-estimate, discussing how they are at work or at school, looking at the results, identifying a best fit type. The underlying message of this process is that with the MBTI we never test and tell. Even when reported preferences are very clear, we treat it as an hypothesis until the type is verified by the respondent. The less clear the preferences, the more discussion, the more reflection, the process of type verification is likely to involve. I want to talk about the items on the MBTI for just a minute, because this tends to be a confusing piece for us as practitioners and for our respondents. People who don't agree with their results or whose results are unclear will often say something along the lines of, I didn't like either of the choices in the questions, or I liked them both. I couldn't choose. And their dilemma comes from the complex construction of the MBTI instrument itself. The questions are worded in such a way that the choices are not logical opposites. They're hard to choose between. They're actually psychological opposites. Each choice is equally desirable, and the two choices in each question represent the psychologically opposite poles of the MBTI preference pairs. As an example, if this type appeared on the MBTI, do you consider yourself more of an organized person or a disorganized person? How many people would choose B? Probably not many. These choices are logical opposites, but one is much these choices are logical opposites, but one is much more desirable than the other. And it's more likely that an MBTI question would ask you to choose between organized and spontaneous. And the respondent is going to say, well, sometimes I'm organized and sometimes I'm spontaneous. These two choices represent the two poles of the judging perceiving preference pair. And the indicator asks you to choose between the four pairs of psychological opposites in many different ways. And it's the pattern of responses that generates the type indexes on the profile. We have to keep taking them back as we're talking about these patterns to that natural feeling of folding your arms or crossing your legs or writing your name. One of the preferences, when it's developed, will feel more natural, feel like the first place you want to go. These are some of the ways to approach the description of the preference pairs. Which one you choose depends primarily on two things. Certainly the developmental stage of the person who's taking the MBTI. Are you working with a high school student or a traditional age college student, someone who's developing their middle two preferences for the first time? Or are you working with an adult who's already pretty well developed, but they're integrating their less preferred functions? And you might not go preference by preference with an adult who has a lot of life experience. It may be that you use the quadrants of the type table or the columns or the temperaments. It also depends on which preference pair or pairs might be in question. And if there's only one preference that's clear, it's going to dictate where we start in the verification of the type, and I'm going to show you several examples. No matter how you present the preferences during the verification process, it's really important to begin by demonstrating what natural preferences are. This is particularly important for sensing types. If you have respondents fold their arms first with one arm on top and then the other, or have them write their name first with their dominant hand and then the other, they can really feel what natural preferences are. And in the certification program, I ask people to come up with different ways that they demonstrate natural preferences, and they come up with some interesting examples. I had one yesterday that described handing a person a banana that was on the desk and asking them to peel it and watching how they peeled it, and demonstrating that they used their right hand to actually pull the pieces of the banana skin down, but they were holding the other hand to support their dominant hand that was doing the peeling. That's exactly what the preferences do. There's one that's natural, and the other one is always kind of lurking in the background, supporting the natural preferences. And you're going to come back to analogies like this over and over and over again as you move through the preference pairs. Almost everyone says when first introduced to type, I do both. Yes, we all do both. But what we're looking for is that hand we use to peel the banana, the type that comes most naturally. Literally, it comes without thinking. We're not even aware of it. We just go there. I'm going to look at some strategies in detail, and before I do that, Leah, maybe some questions have come in because I've just covered a whole bunch of material.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions that have come in, and before I share the questions, I just wanted to share with you that your friends at the University of Tennessee wanted to say hello, Diane, Terry, Elizabeth, Christina, and Tommy.
Hi, guys. Trying to get them to come to Tahoe again this spring for our advanced workshop. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, so another or a question came in. How do clients determine what's natural to them?
Using the best way to do it, I think, is using examples like I just used, first of all, so they can really experience what natural feels like. And then you begin to ask them questions. And as they're answering the questions, you just keep reinforcing which is the one that you go to first, which feels the most comfortable for you. And I actually have a couple of strategies mapped out in a few slides from now where I'll demonstrate specifically how to do that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk a little bit louder. A few people can't hear me too well. So the next
am I talking loudly enough, Leah?
I hear you beautifully. So, and I haven't had any complaints for you. So.
Okay. Okay. If anyone complains, let me know.
Okay. So Rachel had a question. She's asking, when you refer to midlife in terms of personality integration, are you referring to the 40s, the 50s, after retirement?
Gee, you know, I kind of have to leave that up to the client. I sort of feel like some of us reach midlife when we're 14, and some of us are still looking for it when we're 70. One of the ways you know it is that a personality in general will spend the first part of their lives usually looking for focus. What is it that I want to spend my life doing, whether it's career or whatever else brings us meaning? And we look for that, and once we find it, we do what Jung calls, we specialize in who we are, we become who we are. And then we get restless around that at certain times in our lives. And we start saying, is that all there is? You know, I think I'm quoting Anne Margaret or somebody, and we start integrating the other side of our type. And when we go through that process, it's usually a growth process. Sometimes it can be a traumatic change that throws us into it. Sometimes it's just normal seeking to broaden and approach things differently in our lives. But you can usually tell with listening to the person and probing a little bit if they're experiencing that yet or not. Good question.
Okay, and I think that's it for questions. There was just a comment that came in from Elizabeth around examples, and she suggested folding your hands together. She says it's really natural for her to end up with her left thumb on top, and if she tries to do it the other way, she has to think really hard about it. That's a great example.
Yeah, that is a good example. The other one that someone just mentioned to me a few days ago is crossing your legs. There's a natural way that we cross our legs, and if you fold your legs the other way, it's very different. And it's the same thing if you're looking at TF. If you're making a decision, it's which is more natural for you. Do you think of the logical aspects of the decision making first, or do you think of the personal aspects of the decision making first? And people will say, well, I do both. You can't do both. The theory says you can't be on both sides of a dichotomy at the same time. One of them precedes the other. And you know, I have to say that when I'm in a personal relationship, when I'm talking to my daughter, for instance, and we're talking about something personal, I'm expressing personal, but logic is I'm expressing personal because it's the logical thing to do. I know that logic is what comes first. It's just not the way that I'm approaching that particular situation. We just have to keep going back to that and back to that and back to that. But I also want to emphasize that the point of type is not to get it right. I know that some ST types feel that it is, but we don't use assessments to come up with a right answer. We come up with assessments to generate a common vocabulary of understanding so we can start talking about the exploration process. And so if someone can't verify a type, that's not the end of the world. We don't want to beat them up over it, because then they'll feel like they've done something wrong. So I really want to emphasize that it needs to be a gentle discussion.
Okay.
We okay?
Yeah,
Can I go
we're
on?
good on questions. Please do.
Okay, so speaking of vocabulary, I'm going to introduce some vocabulary, as we're going to talk about some specific strategies for verifying type, and it's important that we're talking about the same thing. I'm going to mute for just a minute, excuse me. I'm sorry, I need to clear my throat, and I didn't want everybody to jump in. For instance, when we're talking about type vocabulary, EI and JP are referred to as attitudes or orientations. I usually call them orientations because I think attitude really has a certain connotation for today's students that has nothing whatsoever to do with type. SN and TF are referred to as the mental functions or processes. I usually refer to them as the functions. And together the functions form the heart of our type. SN is the P part of our personality. It's what we do our perceiving with. And TF is the judging part of our personality. It's our judging function. It's what we do our evaluating and our decision making with. And for those of you who are newer to this than others, what we're saying here is that we all have J and we all have P in us, and that's represented by the middle two letters of our type. That's exactly why we can't refer to people as P's or J's. We can say when we're P'ing or when we're J'ing, but we can't identify people as P's or J's because we're all doing both. The hearts of type actually make up the 4 columns of the type table. They're the critical piece in initial career choice and the choice of college majors. And usually when I'm working with younger students, I focus on verifying these middle 2 letters because they're what count in the decisions that are going to be made over the next couple of years while they're in school. Now, coming back to Jane Keyes and her questions again, identifying the preferred functions isn't always easy, and they're most important for the younger people that we're working with. And it's especially challenging for the students who are in school today. And Jane has some questions for verifying SN and TF preferences that can be pretty helpful. I'd like you to consider these, and then we'll look at approaching type verification through type dynamics, which is a little more challenging. Question to help sort out sensing versus intuition information. And again, we're looking for what comes naturally, where they go first. For instance, saying to a student, how do you handle details? Can you tell me exactly where to find something? And the student might respond, well, the checkbook is in the 3rd drawer, right-hand side of the desk. That's kind of a sensing approach. You know exactly where to go to find that checkbook. Or the person might respond, well, the checkbook's in the desk somewhere. It's a more general idea of where to find it. And that's the difference between the way that sensing types and intuitive types handle details. How do you tell someone about your weekend? Is another question you might ask to help them to sort this out a little bit. And actually, I've used this question in some CPP workshops over the past year. It's interesting to see the different variations that come out of this. When you're describing to someone, when you're talking to someone else about your weekend, do you tend to provide highlights from Friday, Saturday, Sunday in order, they're sequential, or do you start with your favorite part of the weekend and move around perhaps sharing ideas instead of events, which is a more intuitive approach to sharing about a weekend? And here are a couple of Jane's TF questions. For instance, saying to your student or a respondent, your friend asks you what you think of her new shirt, and you think it's really pretty ugly. What do you say? Do you say, it's not exactly my favorite, which might be a T response, or that's really different, which might be an F response? Or you might even lie and say that you love it, in fact. A question around what they like studying. What do you like studying about more? Do you enjoy your classes in math, in science, in computer programming, which would be more T interests, or do you like studying about people and cultures, more of the ologies, the psychology, the sociology, things like that, which is more in the F direction? We all know by now, and I've been kind of drilling it into our heads, I think, that we use all 4 functions. And sometimes we use them so quickly that it's hard to tell which might be the natural preference. And this was one of the questions. And I like to think of function preferences as where we go first. For instance, when working on a project, some students will start by gathering a lot of information. It's where they naturally go first. They search the internet, they take notes, they make lists, they try things out. And the process tends to be pretty sequential for them. They start at the beginning and they keep adding pieces of information. And if people ask them what they're doing, they respond with a lot of facts and evidence from past experience. And the information will eventually come together so that they can state kind of a big picture summary of what they've been working on, but they've started with the pieces, not the big picture. Other students will immediately get a big picture in their minds of what they want to do. And then they'll do some information gathering to kind of fill in the blanks and complete the picture. The order in which they describe the information isn't necessarily in sequence. They're more likely to focus on what interests them the most, sometimes even starting in the middle of the project and working their way out to the edges. And if people ask them what they're doing, they'll refer to the big picture first and then fill in some of the blanks. And if a student is questioning this SN thing, probing with questions like this and saying, tell me more, describe a little bit more. The more they say to you, the more you're going to get some clarity about what you can feed back to them. Now at some point a decision actually has to be made about what they're going to turn in for their project. And when deciding, some students will first consider something personal. I really like this stuff. Or if I work on this topic rather than that one, I could really help the second graders I teach. Or maybe working on this topic would help me to understand my family better. See, that's F decision making. Other students will first consider something that just makes logical sense for them to do. If I work on this project, it will help me find a job. Or this project fits in with what I did last semester. It makes sense that I expand my research now so that when I get to my senior thesis, I'll have most of it done already. Or this project would allow me to take charge and really make something happen. Those are more T approaches. Pardon me while I take a sip of water here. The most important use of type with high school and younger college students is to help them to develop their identity, the sense of self. Comparing 2 hearts will often help students to find clarity on one of the functions in the heart if they're not clear. For instance, comparing SF versus NF or ST versus NT. SF, for instance, is the social work model of counseling. It's the intake model where you gather a lot of specific information. And NF is the therapy model. And if I'm working with a student who's deciding between a social work master's degree and a counseling master's degree, we can talk about that SF-NF difference. ST, for instance, is a deductive approach to science and business, and NT is an inductive approach. And any of you who have participated in any of my trainings on the MBTI or the Strong have heard me beat this into the ground. You can't figure out what you want to do without first knowing who you are. You have to answer the who am I question first before exploring the what do I want to do question. Once the who question is answered, the rest is easy. It's just a matter of how. And the challenge of this, and I know that many of you are thinking of this as I say this, is that students and young clients don't ask the who am I question. They want to know what can I major in, what career is best for me, and they want to know it now. This is particularly true of the generation that we're working with today. And I'm afraid that this is also the question that college administrators expect advisors and career counselors to be able to answer in one brief test 'em and tell 'em appointment, and it can't happen. Focusing on the heart of type suggests career fields, while at the same time sneaking in some type development language. So you can kind of keep the administrators happy and do a little bit of developmental work with students at the same time. Now the hearts of type also suggest areas of study, actually areas of college majors and career fields, what would be appealing to us based on who we are. Adding the E, I, and JP orientations gives us specific job titles within career fields, but the career fields come from clarifying this heart of type, and the specific job titles come much later usually. And once respondents can identify the heart of their type, it's just a matter of matching them up with college majors, for instance, and of course with career fields, which is what the career report does. And these career fields are all, they're listed specifically in the MBTI manual, in Introduction to Type and Careers, and many other publications that talk about type and matching type with career. And we have to keep in mind that any type can find satisfaction in any career field. ST types are happiest when they can focus on practical ways to use facts and details. And SF types are happiest when they can be of practical service to others. And NF types need to empower others, often through creativity. NT types have to be intellectually challenged and are happiest when they're focusing on theoretical systems. And I think some of you have heard the story of the ENFP accounting firm that I use. And the name of the firm is GEI, which stands for Growth Encouragement International. And I asked my ENFP CPA once why he chose accounting, and he told me almost verbatim, I didn't choose accounting. I wanted to empower people. Accounting is just the tool I chose to do it because it would get me a job. Believe me, he's very creative in his tax preparation. Sometimes it helps students to own the heart of their type, to consider what makes learning the most meaningful for them. For ST types, learning has to have practical applications. For SF types, it needs to provide helpful resources. For NF types, they want learning to empower personal growth in them. And for NT types, learning has to promote thinking outside of the box. And they can often tell you about their experiences in classes and with different teachers. And as you listen to what it is that's motivating them as they learn new things, you can then reflect back to them. I'm hearing NF from you as you talk about that subject, or I'm hearing ST. And I think I'm kind of out of breath here, Leah, so I think it's a good point to pause for some questions. Perfect. And I'll take a drink of water or two while you're sorting through them.
Yeah, that's good. So, so Eileen has a question. She's interested in, to verify type with a student, would you provide the student with the descriptions of each of the 16 types, or is there another way to help verify type, especially in a group setting?
Well, we certainly will provide them of descriptions at some point. What usually happens is we'll get them as close as we can to their best fit type and try to narrow it down to 2. And then show them, for instance, the wonderful descriptions in Introduction to Type and have them compare. And for instance, I'll have people who think they're feeling types look at 2 descriptions and highlight everything that they think describes them. And people who think they're thinking types, I'll have them look at 2 full type descriptions and have them cross out anything that they think doesn't describe them. I'm a little reluctant to show them those little kind of the thumbnail descriptions that I had up on the screen at the very beginning. I don't like to use those to help them verify because they're kind of like a horoscope. People tend to identify with too many of the types. But yeah, I mean, using those written descriptions is an excellent resource. And I always have written published printed resources out on the table with me or in front of me and on PowerPoints and things when I'm verifying, because the more graphics we have, the more resources we have, the easier it is for us to remember what we're talking about and for other people to have things to look at.
Okay. Great. Question has come in from Teresa. She's interested in, so she's going to be facilitating her first session next week with an HR team. And she's wondering what recommendations you might have to help them use this information with the employees within their organization. Any suggestions on that?
Well, I'm doing a CPP webinar, Leah. So I think probably one of the best resources out there is using the MBTI tool in organizational settings. Or I think is the formal title using the MBTI tool in organizations. It's a facilitator's binder that addresses type from all different kinds of lenses depending on what the issue is that you're addressing with the group presentation. So if you're doing problem solving, you might use temperament. If you're using dealing with change, you might use the quadrants. I think that binder is excellent. It's pricey, but well worth it because you'll have it forever and dog-ear it in a hurry. Is that a good sales job, Leah?
Yeah. Well, okay. It's pointing out a resource that's kind of an out-of-the-box workshop type of resource, which
yeah, it really is. It really is. It literally, you can really pick it up, and it scripts workshops and gives you suggested handouts and things.
Excellent.
It's excellent.
Teresa just said thanks. She actually purchased it just now.
Good. Oh, I'm glad.
That's
okay.
Good, Teresa. So why don't we revisit Jesse's question?
Okay.
There might be some additional color you want to add to it. So he was asking, how do you approach a situation when a client says they think they're both of the pairs and can't make a decision? That he finds it happens most often for the heart of type pairs.
Well, one of the ways that I just demonstrated is actually comparing the hearts and focusing on the letter that they're unclear about. We're going to look at type dynamics in just a minute, which is what part of the type you're hearing and feeding that back. Presenting various career fields and college majors and seeing if they're identifying more with career fields and college majors in one heart than the other. It's the heart of type is the identity of the person. And I know I said this already, but it's who am I? And of course it's hard. And I'm old enough, and some of the people who are with us today, I'm sure, are old enough to remember different ways of parenting and different ways of experiencing life. Where, when I was brought up, I failed a lot. I succeeded a lot, and I failed a lot, and I experienced a lot. And it was in the days when we could go out and walk up and down the street when we were 6 years old. Nobody was going to be worried about whether someone was going to grab us. So by the time we got to college, we knew a lot more about who we were than kids who are getting to college now, who have been super protected. And it's why career counseling has to be, and advising has to be a lot more than just matching somebody up. You have to spend some time actually asking those questions. Let's talk about, when you have an assignment to do, how you go about doing that assignment, and is it sequential, is it linear, or can you just not wait to jump into what part you like best? And when you're making decisions about what topic you're going to choose, is it a personal decision, is it a logical decision, you have to find the questions that the student can relate to, because you're asking questions that when we were younger, in earlier generations, we were automatically asked when we were 10 years old. And now career counselors and advisors are doing some of that parenting. It's the best answer I can give, Leah, except we're going to look at type dynamics a little bit, which might give another angle on it.
Okay, perfect.
And, I wish there were, administrators expect us to be able to do that. They want us to be able to administer the MBTI or the Strong or whatever instrument we're using and say, based on these results, go major in this, or here's the career field. That only works if the person can say, this is who I am, this is what I value, this is what motivates me. And those are tough questions. I feel passionately about this. Can you hear it?
Absolutely. So just one more question here. Tony from San Antonio. He's asking.
Hi, Tony. I know Tony. Hi, Tony.
I thought you might, since he added the
Yeah.
San Antonio in a second
Yeah.
post. So Tony's wondering. He says, hi. Have you found instances where career fields have changed so much the temperaments and hearts of type that choose it have changed?
Oh, what a great question. Oh my gosh, my introverted preference, Tony, just wants to go think about that.
Do you want to think about it and do it in a follow-up?
Yeah, well, Tony and I can dialogue about it. You know, my gut response, this is my gut response, is that the heart of type represents content that we're interested in. And so I don't think the career fields that are identified with the hearts of type are going to change a lot, because the content of general career fields doesn't change. Now, what does change are the preferred ways that we go about approaching that content. And so we might see whole four-letter types appearing more frequently or less frequently in occupations. But I think the career fields are pretty stable. And I don't want to take that, I don't want you to hear a TJ, that's it answer, because I'm going to think about that one some more. We could do a whole webinar on that, Leah.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Sounds good. So I think we're ready to move on.
Okay. Now, up to this point, so far we've been talking about a pretty static approach to verifying type. Helping people to actually choose between S and N, or choose between NT and NF by asking questions, by clarifying experiences. Type dynamics actually kicks type verification up a notch and helps when just choosing isn't enough. And if you haven't experienced type dynamics before, we're only going to look at it here, and I don't think I can communicate a full, thorough understanding of it in a few minutes. But it will at least give you some idea of where you can go when you want to learn how to verify type at a more sophisticated level. The profile you're looking at is for a respondent who's debating between ISTJ and ISFJ. She's an academic advisor. TF is the auxiliary function pair. And you notice that the thinking function has a slight PCI. It's only 2. She identifies with both ST, driven to get it right, and SF, providing practical help to others. This is a good example, I think, following up on Jesse's question about an example of what to do when they say, I do both. She sees what she does as an academic advisor as providing helpful information to students, as providing practical help. That's very SF. But as I listen to her more, her favorite part of her job is teaching students the right way to plan their academic careers. And in fact, her favorite project ever was developing an academic advising workbook for students and a manual of policies and procedures for her department. And the question seemed to be about what motivates her the most, helping students with the information or teaching them the right way to use it. That's the difference between SF and ST. They're both doing helping, but one's very specific and logical, and the other one, it's the helping that's behind the motivation. And no matter how much we talked about ST and SF, she kept saying that she identified with both equally. Now remember, we said earlier that sensing intuition is the perceiving part of our personality. That's what I mean on this slide by SN equals P. And thinking feeling is the judging part of our personality. So we perceive the world around us, we experience the world and take in information with sensing intuition, and we evaluate our perceptions with thinking feeling. I'm going to give you another piece of type dynamics information here. It's another part of the formula. Perceiving types extrovert their perceiving function, either S or N. So if P is clear, which on a profile or in the type verification process, what you're going to hear when that person talks is sensing or intuition, experiences, and information. You're going to get details of past and present experiences, or you're going to get big pictures and possibilities. J types, judging types, extrovert their judging function, either T or F. And when J types talk, we hear T or F outcomes. We hear about, we don't hear, for instance, ideas about a program. We're going to hear about how the program is being implemented. we might hear how the overall structure of student personnel services fits with the program that we're developing, which is kind of T logic. Or we might hear how it's going to benefit students, which is the feeling personal values. So going back to our respondent, we're going to test this out a little bit. So going back to our respondent with the ISTJ, ISFJ dilemma, and her name is Linda, this is how she responded to my question about new advising procedures that are in the works in her department. This is pretty much how she said it. We've been mandated to make our advising procedures more efficient. We now have steps A, B, C, and D. We're computerizing steps C and D and integrating the information with what they're already doing in the Career Center. We'll accomplish the same thing we're doing now in fewer student contact hours. Everyone will benefit. We won't be so overloaded, and students will get the information they need faster. Notice that she mentions both logical outcomes and how they will benefit students and staff, but she goes to logic first. As the MBTI practitioner, it's appropriate to point this out. I could say something like, I can hear that you're struggling between these two types and really want to get it right. There's an ST clue right there. Just to give you some feedback, when I asked you to tell me about the program that you're working on, I heard you evaluating, in fact justifying, the new procedures based on logic. Of course, I also heard you say how the new procedures will benefit the people you care about, your students and colleagues, but you went to logic first. That's what I heard you saying. What do you make of what I just said? Now, as an ISFJ Linda responding to the same question, she would begin her story with students. She's going to extrovert feeling, and that's what I, as the practitioner, am going to hear first. So she might say something like, students come into our office for their advising appointments and they always have to wait. Sometimes we get so far behind that we have to use our walk-in time for catch-up. I sometimes feel like we're just testing and telling and not really preparing them for what lies ahead. I want to really be able to spend time getting to know them during our initial meeting. And by putting some of our basic information online and integrating some of our services with what the Career Center does, we'll be able to give the administrators the efficiency they want while at the same time being more helpful to students. I hope you can see. Now, what I was demonstrating there was a type that extroverts their auxiliary function, either T or F. And by my reflecting back to her that she went to logic first, I'm trying to help her to evaluate whether that's accurate and whether she can verify the IST versus the ISF. Now, once you get really comfortable with type dynamics, you can even use it as a back door into type. This profile is for Larry. Larry's in his 50s. He's enjoyed a career in human resources and training and development. And a year ago he made the decision to leave corporate employment for a work environment that was more in line with his personal values. And he accepted the position of Director of Career Development at a major university. I hope you heard the line, more in line with his personal values, because that's very definitely an NF expression of type. He's participating in a team building exercise with his staff, and everyone is surprised to see him put his name in the ENFP cell of the type table. He's actually a little hesitant about putting it there himself. And as the day goes on, he hears from his staff that they perceive him as ST and not ST at its best. It seems to be almost extreme. His micromanagement style is very rigid, and he spends most of his time telling people what they're doing wrong. That's not how we did it in the business world, is his very favorite phrase. Larry was puzzled, and his introverted feeling function was deeply hurt. A coach in the university's HR department agreed to help him understand his type a little better. Larry was under stress, and when he applied for his position, the hiring committee was so excited about his corporate experience and his vision for university career development. He was asked to develop and carry out a 3-year plan to move the department in a new direction, and he couldn't wait to collaborate with his staff of career development professionals and actually make it happen. But pretty soon after he started in his new position, he discovered that there were no resources, and his staff wasn't particularly collaborative, and they weren't exactly thrilled about the changes he was suggesting in the way they were doing their jobs. His inferior sensing function took over, accompanied by the reverse of introverted feeling, which is extroverted supercritical judgment. Gaining an understanding of the dynamics of his type, Larry learned to do two things. He learned to manage his stress a little better and to develop the ST aspects of his personality in more positive ways. His negative response to stress actually helped him to verify his ENFP type. That's what we call the back door. Now, if you're using the type dynamics approach to verifying type, you want to verify EI first. This determines the fundamental energy flow for respondents. An understanding of E versus I energy will help them to understand their functions. Then you move to JP. Since they now have an understanding of extroversion and introversion, the JP is verified in terms of their external orientation to life. Once EI and JP have been verified, you can then take SN and TF in either order. I usually start with whichever function is extroverted and then build the heart of type from there. Verifying JP first enables you to correctly select examples of S, N, and TF depending on whether the function is extroverted or introverted. For instance, ISTJ and ISTP types are very, very different. Only one letter different, but they're very different. ISTJ, with introverted sensing, collects, organizes, and stores information for recall. ISTP, with extroverted sensing, stays present by fully experiencing the environment around them. ISTJ is all about storing and retrieving accurate information. ISTP is all about solving problems with their senses, hands-on. And if you verify JP first, then you know to select examples around SN and TF that are either extroverted or introverted orientation examples. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention Larry is because verifying a four-letter type and matching it up with majors and career fields is only one approach to applying type to career development. We also want to be prepared to deal with the other side of our client's type when they're under stress, like I just talked about, and also in later life maturity. When we're working with experienced adult students and clients, we want to first determine if they've been living and working out of their true type up to this point and are now exploring and integrating the other side, or have they been living and working out of an adaptive type and they now want to get it right. And you need to do that with a pretty thorough intake appointment where you search and discover what's really going on. Have they been happy and now they're expanding, or have they always been dissatisfied and now they're looking for the right career field? If they're in the get it right category, we can help them to verify their best fit type and help them to transition. But if they're integrating their less preferred functions, we have to go a little deeper. And a way to help us do that is with the MBTI Step 2. I'm not going to teach you the whole Step 2 in 5 minutes. I'm just going to show you one example of type development in the Step 2. The MBTI Step 2 generates the four-letter type plus 20 subscales that are called facets. This profile is for a man in his early 40s who's in a graduate program in organizational psychology. And you can see the ISTJ preferences. His reported type shown here is clearly ISTJ, but his self-estimate was INTJ. And this is why. These are the 5 facets, the 5 subscales for sensing intuition. On the experiential theoretical facet of sensing intuition on the Step 2, he scores in the theoretical direction. In fact, we would call him a theoretical ISTJ. And in fact, he really enjoys studying about theoretical frameworks of psychology. He said that when he was younger, he really was sensing, but now he thinks his type has changed. Now, since we know the type is a genetic imprint and doesn't change, the Step 2 brought him to an understanding with some good, solid ST data of what's really going on with him. He's developing his less preferred intuition function. In fact, when people want to consciously develop their less preferred functions, the step 2 can point the way to where to start. Now that's all the content I'm going to throw out to the audience today, Leah, but I know we've only scratched the surface. Looking at type verification is a very complex process, and it takes a pretty good solid understanding of type. These are the resources that are published by CPP that I find most helpful. Finding the Fit is Sally Carr's booklet on questions to ask and situations to frame to help people verify when they're very close on preferences. The Introduction to Type booklets are all part of a series that's actually much broader than the ones I've listed here. Type and Career Development is a booklet for practitioners to see how type to look at how type develops over the lifespan. Understanding your your MBTI Step 2 results is the booklet that helps respondents to understand their Step 2. And Career Exploration Using the Strong and the MBTI Tools happens to be the booklet that I wrote that brings the MBTI together with the Strong. And interestingly, these two assessments can often help to kind of verify each other. And our next webinar, I think in November, is actually on that topic. This is a great time to think about adding to your MBTI library because CPP has a special. CPP is offering a discount on products from their education catalog. Please make a note of the promotion code. It's bolded there, B2S2010. That's the promotion code if you're planning to order. And notice that the expiration date on the offer is October 30th. It doesn't apply to Skills 1 purchases or renewal fees, and they don't want you to combine it with a lot of other offers or anything. But it will give you promotion in adding some of these basic resources to your library. And if you'd like to take the MBTI or sample one of the reports, this is the link to actually taking the assessment on the CPP website. It's cpp.com/testdrive. And I know that Jim and Jack have been with us all through this presentation. They patiently listen to me every month as I prattle on. Jim and Jack are CPP's education account representatives. Many of you already know Jim. Jack is new with CPP, or actually, Jack, haven't you been here for 6 months now?
Right about, yeah.
And Jack is in charge of new accounts. And he's actually been through both the Strong and the MBTI certification programs, as Jim also has been, and they're very, very familiar with these assessments.
Thank you, Judy.
Hello, everyone.
I'm sorry, I heard you say hello. Say hello again.
Just saying hello, yes.
That's Jim, and now Jack, say hello.
Hello.
Jack's radio voice. I love that. Okay. You can become certified to use the MBTI through 4 different organizations, and these are the links, but if you just remember the initials, you'll get to the links, and they're all listed on the CPP website as well. CPP offers certification training, the American Management Association, CAPT, the Center for Applications of Psychological Type, and GS Consultants. The GS program is delivered online, and it's specifically for educators and career counselors, and GS also offers a Step 2 training online. Now, Leah, I think we have just a few minutes left. How are we doing on questions?
No, we've got a couple of questions here. Diane is interested. Can you explain the introvert and extrovert in relation to the formula? For example, ISTJ is introverted sensing, and ISTP is extroverted sensing.
Yeah. I know that some of the people who are on, who are listening today are in the online certification program, and they're all groaning because we spent a lot of time working on this. The basic formula, and you're going to want to look at Introduction to Type Dynamics and Development, or the manual, or one of the other books to actually walk you through it. The basic formula is that JP tells you which of the middle two letters is extroverted. And so if the type ends in J, as ISTJ, then the judging function of thinking will be extroverted. If the type ends in P, then the perceiving function will be extroverted. That's sensing or intuition. In ISTP, it would be sensing. And then the first letter of the type tells you whether the function that is extroverted is dominant. If it's an extroverted type, the extroverted function is dominant. If it's an introverted type, the extroverted function is auxiliary. Did I get that right, you guys? I can't believe I just did that without looking at anything, but those are the basic steps. It doesn't come to life, though, until you actually look at various situations, as we did with the client that I was talking about.
Okay, excellent. So Elizabeth has a question. So she's saying that her organization doesn't currently use the Myers-Briggs, but she's interested in combining the MBTI and the strong. So she's interested in how much is Skills 1, and is there an additional cost per user, and is there a way to sell access codes in the bookstore where students can charge it to financial aid? So Jim or Jack, perhaps you can answer that question.
Yeah. The first thing to note when combining the MBTI and the strong is that the strong...
Speak up, Jim.
The first thing that you want to make sure you understand is purchasing the strong and MBTI career report that report is intended to supplement a previously generated MBTI report and a previously or accumulated strong report, which can be generated with the combined. But you cannot get the strong and MBTI career report as a standalone report. The language that's used and the way it's used assumes a previous report for the strong and the MBTI. Having said that, then, the common package would be the MBTI profile and the strong college profile and the strong and MBTI career report, which, depending on whatever discounts you're eligible for, would bring you in about $27 to $28 per student. The Skills 1 site has a $195 setup fee, which then is also the annual license renewal fee. So annually it will cost $195. Then once the site is set up, you buy the individual reports that you're intending to give to the student.
Jim, could I jump in?
Please do.
Because I know some people are using the combined report by purchasing the package that is just the strong profile and the combined report.
Correct.
And then because they already have students' types from other, from other instruments, maybe?
Okay. Other sources.
Other sources, right.
Yes, so in that case, you're right. You don't need to purchase the MBTI report, but you would need to know their four-letter type, and you can manually select that during the generating process for the combined and strong profile. That is correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you generate a combined report and then the person tells you later that their type is different than what the report is generated for, can't you regenerate that report with the corrected type in it?
Yes, you can. You have the option of selecting the so-called verified type as opposed to the reported type. And that would be a free generation for that one change.
Right, and that works for the MBTI career report too. And that's a very helpful tool to use in the type verification process, because if someone that you're working with says, I'm pretty sure I'm an INFP, and then as you work through the report with them, they say, nah, I'm pretty sure I'm in INFJ. You can rescore the report and have both documents and compare them, and that very often kind of solidifies things for people. Now, I heard the question, too, about selling it in the bookstore. Many campuses do that. They will sell an access code. That's exactly what they do. put a price tag on it, and it may be limited to people who are registered for a class, a career guidance class, or a student orientation program or something, or it can be just directly attached to individual appointments in the Career Center or the Advising Center. So yes, it's done. And Karen Gonzalez monitors the LinkedIn discussion groups and all of the social network groups for CPP. And Karen, I think that would be a great dialogue to get started, is how different campuses handle it.
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion, Judy. I'll pass that along to Karen. Okay.
Anything else?
So Janet is curious, is there a printed resource that shows majors correlated to the 4 functions?
Where do those majors come from? Introduction to Type in college.
Right.
And in the manual. And I think those are the 2 major places that I got them from for this PowerPoint. There's also a little bit of common sense involved.
Okay.
But I think they're listed. They're listed. I'm just thinking backwards. They're listed in the manual. Introduction to Type in college, and also Introduction to Type and Learning, I believe.
Okay.
You can also go backwards from the job titles. If someone if accountant is listed as a job title, you can back up and say accounting might be a related major.
Excellent.
That was my brilliant statement of the day, folks.
I liked your statement about the creative tax accounting, personally.
Yeah. Oh, he was wonderful, though. Yeah, he was wonderful. And my husband, who is also my business partner, was an ENFP as well. And we used to go in to have our taxes done, and it was never about the taxes. And the 2 of them would just connect around this mutual empowerment. It was wonderful.
Okay, so Tony from San Antonio has a couple of follow-up questions. I'm curious if you guys might want to have a conversation in person or over the phone. He's saying he wants to know how to administer it to his students at the community college, that he really needs examples. And, is there a way that a list of colleges where it's administered in the classroom are provided?
Now, I wouldn't be able to provide that. And I'm not sure what Tony's asking. If it's administered in the classroom, it's usually part of a class. So people would use the self-scorable and then do a group interpretation, or they'd have people take it, and it would be scored on skills 1, and results would be given back. But if Tony has specific questions, he knows where to find me.
Okay. Tony, why don't you follow up with Judy with a few more specifics? Okay. And then we're actually about out of time. We've got just a couple of minutes left, or actually just about 30 seconds left. So I think at this point we've come to the end of the webinar, and so I wanted to thank everyone for taking time out of their day today to attend and for asking so many excellent questions. I'd also like to thank Judy for sharing her knowledge and expertise with us today. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing series featuring Judy as our expert. Our next webinar is scheduled for November 16th, and we'll cover the topic of combining the STRONG and the MBTI assessments in career counseling. We already have more than 70 people registered to attend that webinar. So if you'd like to register, you can visit our website at www.cpp.com/askanexpert, and I hope you'll join us again. So thank you all for attending today, and please, everyone, have a great day.